Welcome to the Dark Mind Podcast. Friends and familiars, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Dark Mind Podcast, where we explore the boundless realm of dark literature and film. On today's show, we have a prolific writer who has conquered both traditional and self-publishing realms with his gripping horror novels. He's joining me today to discuss his recent novel, Mirror World, as well as his numerous upcoming projects. So without further ado, join me as we delve into the dark insight of Boris Bacic. Boris, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this 17th day of February 2024. I came across the announcement for your book, Mirror World, on Instagram, and I've been wanting to have you back on the show for a while. And with the publication of Mirror World, the timing was perfect. I checked the book out, and as always, it had elements of the supernatural, but also a plot that has many possible explanations, leaving the reader guessing all the way through to the end. So I'm looking forward to delving into the inspiration for this multifaceted story.
Well, let's hope the readers enjoy it as much as you did.
Oh, I think they might. It's really interesting to me how prolific you are, but with the quantity still comes the quality. You know, usually it seems like you have to sacrifice that, but not in your case.
Right. So in my case, there's so many ideas, so many things I want to write, and there's just not enough hours in the day. And sometimes you do get stumped. You don't know what to do. You don't know how you're going to proceed. So I just leave that on the back burner and I start focusing on a different story. But the ideas just never stop coming to me.
The endless creative assault on the mind of an artist.
Well, unless you run into writer's block, then you're pretty much screwed.
Is that really a thing?
I've had that a few times,
Okay.
Especially when you're under a lot of stress. If there's a lot going on in your life, if you're distracted and so on, it can very, very easily happen. And I've seen that impacting some of my books as well, like one of the books, Sinister Melody. This was when I was going through a lot in my life, and it was really impacting the story. And the reviews can really show that too, because the quality was just not there as for my other books.
Yeah, listeners at home, specifically those that are writers themselves, do not take offense to my comment about writer's block really being a thing, because it seems like half the writers I talk to say it's a thing and half don't. So I'm curious, like, is it just a personal perception, personal perspective? Because me not being a writer myself, I haven't really experienced that, but I could imagine that would be extremely aggravating, considering, from what I've been told, the creative flow when you're like really in the zone, just it's coming out, and then all of a sudden you can't reproduce that anymore. It's got to be maddening.
It does, but you got to understand that for a lot of authors, writer's block is just an excuse for procrastination. You know, a lot of them are going to be checking Facebook, checking Instagram, TikTok. It can be very distracting in today's era because we've got notifications coming from everywhere. And it's just so easy to be pulled out of that zone when you're writing and just get distracted easily. And for me, if that happens, it's very hard to get back into it because it's kind of like a train. I need to catch momentum. Once I do, it becomes easier for me. But without that, it's very hard to get back into it, you know?
Well, You evidently didn't have it. Well, maybe you did, but if you did, you muscled through it for this book because you completed a book called Mirror World. And it is about a young woman named Chloe who is 16 years old and lives a very difficult life. She lives with the emptiness of losing her father, who was a war veteran that died in Iraq. This resulted in her mother succumbing to the subversion of alcoholism to deal with the loss, which then turned her into an absent mother. So to add insult to injury, she goes to a school where she's relentlessly bullied by a young woman named Olivia, who is a mean girl par excellence. And I was talking to Mark Taus about the phenomenon of the mean girl. I guess it's kind of a meme almost. It's common for adolescents to be cruel, but now it seems like bullying people, as if you're some sort of raging sociopath, brings the same respect as being the captain of the football team. Where do you think this comes from?
So the thing is, I think a lot of this is just inherent human nature. It's very easy to be cruel, to be bad to people, to be evil, because it doesn't take any effort. Whereas when it comes to being kind, compassionate, this actually does take some effort. It does take a lot of work. And I think it's always been seen that when we are a bully, it's sort of like this pack leader mentality. The guy who starts to bully whoever, he's seen as cool. Everybody wants to be around them. Everybody wants to hang out with them. And I think it sort of pulls other people in. So even those who don't want to be necessarily bullies, they tend to kind of hang out with these people, and it's a very infectious mentality that passes on to other people as well. So you might not necessarily agree with the bullying, but you want to hang out with the cool guys, and then you start to kind of behave like that too.
Yeah, and when did it seem to get popularized in modern culture as far as like, I mean, I know there's literally a movie called Mean Girls. When did it become such a meme?
When I think of bullies and all that, the start of bullying, it's always American movies in the 80s and in the 90s. There's always this very stereotypical jock kind of guy that bullies whoever, or it's going to be this super rich, spoiled girl who's going to be, bothering the other girls. I think it's really hard to pinpoint because it probably happened even before that, before schools and all that. There's always bullying. Wherever you look, there's always bullying, whether it's in the workplace or in the school or, even at home, unfortunately. And it's very hard to pinpoint because, like I said, I think it does come from human nature that we tend to be cruel because a lot of the times bullies, they do not come from a healthy environment. So they are compensating for something for most cases. So what happens is, in order to feel better about themselves, they're going to be bullying other people because there's no other way for them to express their dissatisfaction and their emotions. So I would say this goes way back in time, but the stereotypical jock and other kind of bully, that's just been made popular by the media.
Yeah, bullies definitely don't exist in a vacuum. Well, you begin the story with a quote from Nietzsche: "When you stare into the abyss stares back at you." What message or tone were you attempting to convey with that quote?
So the thing is, that message sort of got lost in the story because the point was, I've always been fascinated by mirrors. And I've always thought about like what is on that other side, like the possibility of it. And there's this effect, I forgot what it's called. When you stare too long, you start to see some things in your peripheral vision that aren't exactly there, but your mind plays an illusion on you and your eyes and so on.
Oh.
And I've always been fascinated by this. And I think, of course, any horror author, when they start to think about these things in mirrors, everybody is pretty much scared of mirrors. But when you think about it, you always think about what if something's on that other side, And the message I was trying to convey in Mirror World is that there is something out there that might be similar to our world, but not exactly, that it's different in many ways we can't really comprehend. And that beauty of the abyss is that when you look at it, you might not understand what's over there. You might not even see exactly what's in there, but you're going to see something that's going to unnerve you.
Mm. Well, transitioning from this kind of alternate reality through the mirror into, I don't know, maybe an alternate reality in the dreamscape, in sleeping and waking life. From beginning to end, many of Chloe's thought processes occurred as a result of contemplating the dreams and nightmares she was having. And I've been thinking about how dreams convey information, and it's as if the character stumbles across the information in the dream, kind of like found footage. So do you think dreams operate similarly to found footage? And what is something you can convey to a character only through a dream, or at least more effectively through a dream?
Right. So one of the things that I've learned is when we have, for example, recurring dreams, and if they're very vivid, it means we're revisiting something that we still haven't resolved from our past. It conveys some of our desires, some of our subconscious, and so on. And I think when it comes to books, something you can really do nicely is you can convey some abstract information, something that either, like you said, gives us a hint or foreshadowing of what is about to happen. However, those dreams need to have some sort of openness to interpretation. Because if you, write about a dream and it's just a bunch of gibberish going on, which happens a lot of time, a lot of people don't like that. I personally don't like reading about dream sequences either, because a lot of it just doesn't make sense to me. I know there's a lot of symbolism going on over there and so on. For me, it was very difficult, but I like to write dreams in a way that it's abstract, left for interpretation, while also at the same time giving us some sort of hint without exactly being on the nose. And I think that's very important, that we can convey some things without actually saying them aloud.
Gotcha. So what kind of research have you done in dreams? And kind of backtracking to what you said, dreams are your mind attempting to solve unresolved issues. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah. What kind of research have you done? Or is it Jungian or more mainstream scientific?
Oh, yeah, it was more like just internet knowledge, street knowledge, whatever you would call it. So
Yeah.
just looking up whenever I have a dream or something like that, I just like to look it up to see what the meaning behind that could be. What could this mean? What could I be suppressing? What's in my subconscious, subconscious mind? And I just sort of gathered a lot of information about that. And there's a lot of course, subjective opinions over there, whether dreams have any meaning at all. Of course, if you're dreaming about, like, I don't know, helicopters and whatever, you're probably not going to have meaning for a dream. There's no meaning there. But most of the time, especially a recurring dream, from what I've learned, I just found it fascinating that they said that if there is a recurring dream and if it's vivid, you're most likely revisiting something that your mind is telling you, something that you're basically suppressing when you're awake.
Mm. Yeah, the unconscious mind will really start messing with you when when your conscious mind shuts down. Like, wait a minute.
It's a treasure trove of ideas for horror stories and whatnot. It's just great.
Oh yeah, the shadow self, the dark mind. Mm. Definitely. Well, speaking about dark subject matter, there is a lot of mention of scars on Chloe's wrist from self-harm. Not from a suicide attempt per se, but from cutting to stimulate the release of the body's natural opioids to help mitigate emotional pain. And I've noticed a trend on social media with young women who wear scars like a badge of honor, I guess as a testament to the fact that they're dealing with mental and emotional pain. And being a member of Gen X, I can relate to the romanticization of self-destruction, or at least self-harm. Have you noticed the trend of the popularization of self-harm and specifically borderline personality disorder among young women online that seems to be inspired by movies like Girl Interrupted and personas like Amy Winehouse? And if so, do you think it's cathartic or harmful, and why?
Right. So a lot of these people tend to hide these things. So they don't really like to talk about it. But from time to time, there's, of course, a dangerous trend that's going to come out, and people are going to jump on board because, of course, they're going to think it's cool, or because it's just, trendy right now and they're going to want to do it. There's been so many, like, for example, with TikTok, so many dangerous trends that got people killed and so on. And this can be a very dangerous thing because so many people engage in this activity without actually understanding the implications. And I think that's one of the things that social media does. And for people who tend to, do that, and I'm speaking from experiences of other people, not my own. It can be cathartic in that moment because what happens is it takes away the mental pain and it redirects the focus on the physical pain. And it's very difficult to understand for some people how much mental anguish someone might be going through when they resort to something that's going to be rather physical suffering in that moment than it's going to be the mental anguish that they're experiencing. And I think it's sort of like, well, with any decision like taking drugs or whatever, you're going to regret it later. You're going to feel better in the moment, but after it's done, you're just going to have this same empty feeling like you did before.
I would assume, though, having addiction in my own background, that at a certain point, it just stops working. Like you're saying, like it feels good in the moment, but then there's the aftermath. At a certain point, I would imagine, like any addiction or any method to change the way you feel, I imagine after a while that just becomes an empty action.
Yeah. And that's why so many people, just like with anything that's addictive, you need to constantly increase the dosage. Whatever it is, whether it's drug addiction or whatever, you always constantly need to increase that limit. You got to move the goalpost and so on. And it just becomes a trap because it's impossible to stop and you constantly need more. And it comes to a point when you just cannot satiate that desire anymore.
Yeah. Well, this being a story about high school, it of course involves Chloe having a crush, and it's on a strapping young lad who is one of those people that are very attractive and popular, but will talk to anyone because they've somehow not let their social status go to their head. And this accidentally lands Chloe in some hot water when she mistakes his kindness for a romantic interest. And there was a girl like that in my high school growing up. She was drop dead gorgeous, very intelligent, very athletic, and everybody, including the teachers, wanted to be associated with her in some way because, that's how it is with beautiful, talented people. You want to be in their sphere. It's almost like you'll get their energy by osmosis or something like that.
Right.
But she was so nice. And if there was a new person that showed up to class, she would be the first to say hello and introduce herself. And it was crazy to watch it happen with very shy people because they would usually freeze and be speechless when the stunning girl walked up to them and said hello. So, did you know anyone growing up like that in school? And if so, what do you think it is about them and their life that short circuits the impulse to let their appearance and ability go to their head?
First of all, I think the parents of those children did a very good job raising them right because they've taught them that fame in high school that you're going to get from bullying other people or being shallow or whatever is just going to last while you're in high school. Afterward, none of it is going to matter. And I think these people sort of have this, I don't want to say intellect, I want to say the ability to look forward and to really think ahead and to realize that these things are meaningless and that the gratification you're going to get from, being mean to other people is really not doing anything for anybody. And when you're out of school, when you finish high school, the bullies, they probably won't care. But these people who have been bullied, these experiences are going to stick with them for a very long time. They're going to keep thinking about it. They're going to keep revisiting those events in high school. And I think many of these people are empathetic and they know they wouldn't want to be treated like that. And so they're not treating other people like that too. And naturally, of course, they come from a healthy environment and they have no need to bully other people because they're completely satisfied with what they have. They know their worth and there's no need to take out their, let's say, suppressed anger or whatever on other kids. And I think it's very rare. I think it's very rare because even good people, when they do become, let's say, the pack leader or get into this sort of position of popularity, power, and so on, many of them are going to abuse that. And this is just, again, the natural way that humans operate. You give them a little bit of a taste of, wealth, power, whatever else, they're going to start to abuse it, whether that's in high school or in adulthood when you're working in corporate or wherever else. It's just one of those things that good people can get corrupted very easily in those positions. And I think the ones like the girl you mentioned that went to school with you, she's got to have very high integrity. And it's very
Mm.
impressive that she was able to remain uncorrupted when there's so much peer pressure around us.
Mm. Yeah, money and power corrupt. They're usually talking about, like politicians and the like. But I mean, being beautiful is power, right?
Right. Right. We get, again, gratification from it. We like to feel beautiful, powerful, strong, like we're the best and whatnot. And, it starts from an early age. It starts from an early
Mm.
age, and we just start to build that up there. And then when we get to adulthood, we just crave that even more. We're looking for it. And again, it's a very addictive feeling, being in control, being this leader and so on. It's a very addictive feeling.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy lately. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, they refer to him as such because he was one of the few politicians, unlike Nero, who didn't let money and power corrupt him. Just practiced integrity and never stopped learning. He would attend lectures.
Right.
As the king, as the emperor, I should say.
Right. And these people know true values. They follow these values, not the shallow stuff, not the money. And in today's world, it would probably be girls, cars, and whatever.
Yeah.
But these people knew that there was something higher than that, something way more important. And again, I think it goes back to being able to see things ahead of, their own time, and to adapt to that, to look ahead and to just start planning rather than I want to have what I want now.
Hmm. Well, circling back to the story effectively illustrates the slow, steady progression of the pain in Chloe's life, and at just the right time, Chloe makes contact with another person through her bathroom mirror. And I guess it's not too much of a spoiler to say that person is the mirror image of herself, referred to by the narrator of the story as Mirror Chloe. The existence of mirror worlds, which are reflections of the real world, made me think of the multiverse theory of the universe, which I believe Chloe mentions in the book. Was this element of the story particularly inspired by your reading of any material on quantum physics? And could you expand on the inspiration for this aspect of the story?
So I haven't exactly read quantum physics because I was very bad in school when it comes to physics and math and so on. But the theories are very, very interesting. I've always been fascinated by the multiverse theory. And then a few years ago, I read an article about a mirrorverse theory, which is pretty much the same as the multiverse, but, connected through mirrors. So I took a lot of inspiration from that. So I've always been fascinated, like, what is out there besides our own world? Is there any alternate reality? Is there any other world? How many of them? And, particularly for the multiverse theory, it talks about if you travel far enough, you're going to see pretty much the same world as ours, only, let's say, instead of a red shirt, I'm wearing a blue shirt today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fascinating that it raises the question, how many worlds exactly are there out there if there's so many of them? And the possibilities are always infinite. I've always been fascinated by this, and I wanted to combine that with elements of horror, so to make it so more of a sci-fi plus horror blended together and create something of my own that way. So it was more of a passion project. The whole book, Mirror World, it was more of a passion project. But this is like the third attempt I had at writing a mirror book, because I've had that for a very long time. And sometimes it always, steers away from the original idea of what I had in mind. So the plan I had is not conveyed exactly as I wanted it to be conveyed in the book, but it does still convey the main idea, which is there's something terrible beyond the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean about, you say, I was bad in school. I attempted to read Something Deeply Hidden by Sean Carroll. Mm-hmm. And I think the book that specifically deals with the multiverse is, I forget what it's called, but it's written by Brian Greene, I think his name is. Okay. But I tried to read both of those books, and I hung on. I was comprehending for maybe half a chapter, and then it just got so, theoretically heavy that my brain started smoking, because it's like all of these concepts that like completely rearrange your perception of the way the universe and reality operates, you have to just adopt all of a sudden and then hang on to and learn new things as you go. It just gets too much to handle.
There's just way too much to grasp over there, and that's the biggest problem for me. Like at some point, I contemplated going back to college, studying astrophysics,
Mm.
and just seeing the entry test just dissuaded me from it right away. Because there was just this wall of numbers and letters, and I was like, you know what?
Mm.
No, I'm just going to stick to literature.
Well, you need to write about an astrophysicist.
And see, I read a book by Blake Crouch called what was it, Dark Matter.
Mm.
And that book specifically focuses on multiverse. This is more of a mystery, action, thriller, sci-fi, some combination of those.
Oh, okay. So this is fiction because I think
This is fiction.
isn't
Yeah.
dark matter an actual thing?
We still don't know. We think it's now, but
okay.
we don't know. But anyway, yeah. So his book was doing a very good job explaining everything while still keeping you immersed in the story. It wasn't very technical. It wasn't going into the scientific details that, are just going to string you along. So it was done very nicely. This was after I had written Mirror World. So if I had read it before, the book probably would have been better because I would have been influenced by Blake Crouch's writing and I would have seen like how he did it.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Well, in the reflected world, Chloe is able to live out fantasies that she wouldn't ordinarily be able to enjoy in the real world. And with the way AI is accelerating what we're able to achieve in the virtual world, it seems like at some point we're going to have to redefine what the word real means in different situations. And as Morpheus says in The Matrix, and I know there's a lot of haters in that movie. I love that freaking movie.
It was a great movie.
Yeah. As Morpheus says, what is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, and what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain, which is a scary concept to mull around in your head.
Right.
So if what Chloe experienced in the mirror world gave her a real world emotional experience, didn't she technically really experience it? And can you expand on the mirror world and its experiences in the story?
So this is one of those things that many people would probably disagree about. I thought about it a lot. I thought about it a lot ever since, what was it called? That TV show Black Mirror came out. There's been a lot of talk about that, like what's real, what's not, what's ethical, unethical, and so on. And it's sort of like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of a thing. But here's the thing. If you go to, let's say, another world, you do something there, it's going to stay there, but you're going to bring that part of you back to your world. So it's going to change you in no matter what minuscule way, it is still going to change you and you're going to bring that back. So it's going to be like two separate puzzles, something you did in that world, which is going to stay there, something you're going to bring back with you, something that changed you, inadvertently. And that's just the other piece of the puzzle. So I think that's just insane to assume that, let's say you can go there, you can do whatever you want, you can change things, you can steal, rob, whatever you want to do, whatever people's fantasies are, and come back and, be guilt-free. That's, again, in my opinion, not how it works.
So in these worlds, it's almost like you yourself are not a complete person. Your reflected self is actually a part of you. So it's like something that happens in the mirror world is affecting a part of you. It's affecting you in real time in an alternate, whatever you want to call it, an alternate dimension or.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is, again, I think it's like, theoretically, if we were to go to the other world, cause some havoc over there and so on, it would impact it. Either way, it would impact us, it would impact it. And nothing is excluded from the damages that we do or from the good stuff that we do. And I think it's a very difficult topic to discuss because it's so subjective. And the things that we haven't really been able to experience yet, things that are just not realistic, it's very easy for people to talk about decisions they would make, things that would affect their lives and so on. Whereas in reality, it's a very different thing. Sort of like, just recently, this is the discussion I had with my girlfriend a few days ago. about that movie that just came out on Netflix, Society in the Snow, of the Snow, whatever it's called. It was
Oh
a
yeah.
true story about that crew that crashed in the mountains, and they had to eat their dead.
Oh, the one they made that movie Alive
Right,
about.
right,
Okay.
right. So, and it's like she was asking me, like, would you do that? Would you eat the dead, if you were forced to? And I'm like, from this perspective, from this standpoint, it's easy to say that no, I wouldn't. But 7 days of being hungry, and anybody would probably change their opinion.
Yeah. I would start eating bugs if there weren't people around. I
Exactly.
mean, the drive for self-preservation, you've got three levels of thinking. You've got your primate brain, your mammalian brain, and your reptilian brain. Once you get to the point of being starved, the only thing working is your reptilian brain. Feed or breed. I gotta fucking eat.
Right, right. And this is a very powerful thing, like even for people who decide to, take their own lives and whatever, even in those moments, it's like the brain and the body are fighting against it because the instinct to stay alive is just more powerful than anything.
Yeah. Well, circling back to the book, part of what allows Chloe to experience all of this escapism is the fact that she basically has a completely absent mother who stays drunk all the time. And as common as alcoholism, bullying, and unrequited crushes are among young people, do your young readers contact you about experiencing these things themselves and look to you as sort of a mentor?
Well, first thing is I don't really have young readers, which I cannot decide if it's a good or a bad thing, but I do have a lot of people who identify with certain issues, certain problems. Most of my readers are like 40 plus and so on, maybe 30 plus, and they identify with so many things over there. So what happens is I do get emails from time to time where they can say like, "Oh, you've written this character so well. I could feel like I was really there. I could feel like I was reliving my past and so on." And of course, there's really nothing you can do for these people. Like a lot of these times, I want to say, I can't really be a therapist. I myself need a therapist, And I think I still find some kind of joy in the fact that they are able to. I take it as a compliment that I've written a character that is so realistic that they are able to say, like, yeah, this really struck home because I felt like I was really there, like I was reliving that.
Hmm. So when you're writing, do you have a particular age group that you feel like you're writing for, or does that even come into the equation?
Most of the time, it just depends on the story itself. I just look at it from people my age because that's the most relatable thing for me. But
Hmm.
for example, writing this book, Mirror World, it was very difficult because I had to write a teenager. I hardly remember what it was like being a teenager, and so many things have changed since then. And it was very, very difficult for me to write something like that. So most of the time, what happens is I try to get into the head of whatever age the character is. So whether it's an old person or a young person or a kid. And again, for me, it's of course much easier to get into the heads of somebody my age because I know what I think like,
Hmm.
and I know what people, my peers, think like. But it's a little more difficult, especially for the children. I think that's a very difficult POV to write.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the story, Chloe used writing as therapy, and she did it in the form of writing poems. Have you ever dabbled in poetry or felt inclined to publish poetry?
Oh yeah, I have written poetry in the past. Never published it, never would because my poetry sucks. It really does. This is this is objectively said. It very much sucks. But the only times I wrote poetry is during times of immense emotional or mental distress. And this is when I can sort of tap into the pain and the words are just flowing on the paper. It's like when I'm feeling okay, I cannot write poetry to save my life. I cannot write a
Hmm.
single line of poetry. But when there's something going on, when I'm in some sort of mental anguish, it just goes so easily. Whether I'm writing poetry or just some text for myself or whatever, it just goes so easily. And what's going to happen is I'm going to read it, I'm going to write it, and the next day when I read it, it's going to be very difficult for me to recognize, is this like what I wrote? Because it does not look like my style at all. So it was as if a different person had written it.
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I think you should publish. Oh, okay. You say objectively bad. Has your girlfriend read any of it?
No, I am too ashamed to show it to anybody.
Because you say objectively bad as if like somebody has read it and told you, no, this is horrific, but it's objectively bad in your own. I would imagine you have the, what affects writers, the, not the judgmental voice. What's it called? The critical voice.
And that happens
Yeah.
so much. That happens so much that I'm going to write something and it fluctuates so much. I think it happens to everybody. I'm going to be writing something and I'm going to say, oh man, I am so good. And 5 minutes later, I'm going to reread the same paragraph and I'm going to think, this is total crap. This is second grade material.
Is it hard to stay right sized when you're a writer? You're either like badass or just horrible.
It just
in your mind.
It never goes to the middle. It's always one side or the other. It's always like tipping the scales. It's so difficult to be just focusing on one thing, on one side of it. And I guess it depends on the mood itself. If you're feeling okay that day and you read your stuff, you're going to think, okay, this is actually not bad. But then during some other moments when you read the same thing, you're just going to feel like this is very bad. You want to rewrite the whole thing. And it's a trap that so many writers, well, artists in general, fall into. They start to reread their stuff and they want to rewrite everything and they want to re-edit everything. And it's just a never-ending task that you just keep rewriting the same book, but never reaching the product that you're going to be happy with.
Yeah, with art and I mean, anything creative that you're doing, it's so weird how it's almost like there is no objective reality because you can see something you produced three different ways in three different mental states. If you're tired, it's dog shit, If you're just mentally drained, it needs some work,
Exactly.
And, you lay down, you have 8 hours of sleep, get up, have a cup of coffee and listen to it or read it, whatever your medium is. You're like, God, this is amazing. I am such a badass.
Exactly. And it's just so strange that it can be so polarized that, at one point you can just sit at your desk. You're going to be writing with no problem, 1,000 words within an hour, and it's going to be no problem. But other times you're just going to be sitting in front of a blank screen and you're just going to be frustrated. And of course, the more frustrated you get, the harder it is to write because you can't really write unless you're level headed at that moment. And it's just, it's a paradoxical thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of various forms of art, Chloe, like most teenagers, listened to music, and there was a very obscure, or at least I feel obscure, reference to a band called Architects, which I had completely forgotten existed because I haven't really listened to music in, I don't know, maybe like 5 years. I, listen to like electronic music while I'm working out, but other than that, I don't really follow bands or go to shows anymore, but
Right.
I was curious, has this band gotten more popular? And also, do you listen to Monuments, Periphery, or any sort of gent metal?
For Architects, I wish I could tell you, but I am out of the loop as much as you are. And this was arguably...
We're getting old.
Getting old? Yeah. And this was arguably the most difficult part for me when it comes to writing the book, because I constantly had to use Google for what kind of music teens listen to these days, and it was just a constant struggle of like, okay, what kind of metal music, what kind of rock music, punk rock, whatever. And I was like, okay, is this maybe too mainstream? Is somebody who reads this book, somebody who's around the same age as the main character of the book, are they going to think, oh, this girl in the book is a poser? She doesn't really listen to this.
Oh, man, you really get deep into the... Okay, I got you.
Yeah, so I really like to do the research as much as I can to make it as realistic as possible. And like you, I don't really listen to specific music, only during my workouts. If I run into something I like, I'm just going to select it, add it to my list, and that's it. And it's just a jumbled up list of liked videos, liked songs. That's it. There's no
Mm,
like playlists and whatever. And, so to answer your other question, whether I listened to those other bands you mentioned, never
mm.
heard of them. They're probably on my list, but I don't even know the song name or the band. I just, browse through what I like and I just play it.
Got you. Yeah. There are some strange, newfangled, for lack of a better term, forms of metal out there. Gent is one of them. I don't know if Architects would be considered gent or not, but they're definitely like a more alternative form of metal and a little bit more obscure. I don't think I ever heard them on, the mainstream alternative rock station here in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty niche. So yeah, you did a good job. If you're trying to keep Chloe from looking like a poser, she's got some very niche musical tastes and very dark musical tastes as well, if I remember their music.
Yeah, you and I can say that, but we're not in the right place to judge. The teens are going to be the ones to say whether
Yeah,
it's real.
no shit. I'm kind of exercising some hubris as a 43-year-old man. Like, as I would probably be taken to task by a Zoomer right now. Like, dude, what the hell are you talking about?
And this is why I'm trying to be careful, because I once spoke to some people who I knew listened to, I think they call it new metal or something like that.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned some of the bands I listened to, they were just staring at me like I'm a lunatic. I was like, okay, metal fans tend to be a little, I don't know if the right word is elitist, but if you mention what you're listening to, they can be very judgmental. So I really try to keep that to myself and not really discuss it.
Yeah. Well, I'll just edit it all out. Just kidding. I'm totally keeping it in there.
Yeah, all good. All good.
Well, once Chloe ventures into the mirror world with Mirror Chloe, she learns that there are certain rules to follow, as well as discovering that certain actions in the mirror world don't have the same reactions and consequences as they do in the real world. How did you go about building the mirror world and establishing the laws that govern its existence and demise?
That was, oh man, it took a lot of rewriting, deleting, rewriting. Because the thing is, I wanted to make this as logical as I could. But of course, that's impossible for something like this because so many rules can overlap and contradict each other. And in the end, I decided I'm just going to keep it vague. I'm just going to keep it as vague as possible. And that was probably the better way to go because my main idea was I wanted to convey a sense of caution that was necessary in the mirror world. So when you go there, it's very nice. You have everything you can pretty much do, you can do. You can have all these things, but you got to follow certain rules. And if you take the wrong step, it can have dire consequences. And that's the main idea of what I was trying to convey there. And I think the better way to convey it is by leaving it vague than to lay out all the details, all the rules, which again was my main intention, but I just somehow steered away from it in the end. And I think that worked out better.
Yeah, she finds out some of the purported rules the hard way.
Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of finding out those rules the hard way, there were gaps in the Mirrorverse that held a very complete and overwhelming darkness, which made me think of black holes in the real universe. Was that an inspiration for these gaps, and were there any other analogous elements of the Mirrorverse that exist in the real universe?
So the inspiration wasn't black holes per se, but cosmic horror has always been fascinating to me ever since I read, H.P. Lovecraft and some other books like Nick Cutter, because he focuses a lot on the cosmic horror aspect. And it's like we don't know what's out there. We don't even know how big our own universe is. We can see the observable universe and we still cannot see all of it. However, one thing that was an inspiration for it, there's this thing in space called Boots Void, I think that's what it's called. And this is like this vast expanse of nothingness. There's no stars, no planets, nothing. And scientists don't know why there's nothing there. They just know there's nothing there. And somebody said that if you were to appear in the middle of that Boots Void, and you started traveling toward the nearest galaxy, it would still take you hundreds of thousands of light years to reach the nearest one. So when I created these gaps in the mirror world, this is what I imagined, this all-encompassing darkness, this big nothingness, and that our worlds, they're merely grains of sand.
Okay, well, congratulations. That's way more interesting than black holes. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, look it up. It's very interesting, very scary. Space facts can be very, very scary.
Yeah. I keep on seeing Nick Cutter's name. Tell me, I mean, I guess it's self-explanatory to a point, but tell me about cosmic horror.
So when people say cosmic horror, a lot of people automatically assume space. That's not exactly the case. When we say cosmic horror, we're talking about horror beyond human comprehension, something that you would see, and it's so beyond understanding of humans that it drives you to insanity. And that can be like, staring at the abyss, seeing something there. It's like Cthulhu, written by H.P. Lovecraft, and anything regarding space as well. Because we still don't know much about space. We don't know what's out there. There's so many possibilities. And that fear of the unknown, it's always going to be the scariest thing, because we're always going to be filling the blanks with our own fears, whatever scares us the most. And this is what really fascinates me about that, the idea of something existing out there that is so beyond human comprehension that it would just drive us like, for example, you've seen the movie Bird Box, I assume, right?
No.
Oh, dude, you got to watch that one, because that one, conveys this idea of like, the premise is, it's not a spoiler, by the way. The premise is people who look outside, they immediately commit suicide. Can I say suicide on the podcast, or is that a no?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right,
no, I don't have any advertisers, please. I mark everything explicit. Fuck it.
All right. It's like I got used to TikTok where I have to say unalive for that kind of stuff.
No shit. That's crazy. Unalive.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, they just take your video down.
Oh.
But anyway, so in this movie, people, they see something outside. We don't know what it is, but it drives them to commit suicide.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
All right.
Well, Mirror Chloe was very assertive to the point of being aggressive. Chloe admired and envied Mirror Chloe because she had these qualities that she wanted. And at a certain point after spending time with Mirror Chloe, Chloe began to develop these qualities. What aspects of Mirror Chloe's behavior did Chloe admire the most? Was it solely the assertiveness, or were there underlying qualities that she wanted? Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah. So when it comes to Chloe and Mirror Chloe was sort of a person that Chloe wanted to be like. So this was a persona that she wanted to be, but she couldn't because of her past and because of everything that's happened in her life. And she saw Mirror Chloe for what she was. And this sort of gave her the confidence that, she can get out of this situation she's in, bullying and whatever, that despite the hardships, she could become this person that would be confident, maybe even popular, and that she was hoping that this would sort of solve the problems that she had in her life. And when we see Mirror Chloe, we see that, there's, like you said, assertiveness, there's a lot of confidence, and Mirror Chloe was sort of, I wanted to say, imagine if like you could go back to your childhood at this age and give him some advice. That's how I imagine Mirror Chloe to be to Chloe.
Okay. Well, you've touched on it a little bit already. There is a bit of magic associated with mirrors, and besides showing us a separate reflected universe of ourselves, they allow us to look into our own eyes, which is a strange meditative process. And I was going to ask you if you had ever gotten lost in thought while looking at your own reflection. And you said that there was some sort of, I guess, trick that your brain plays on you where you see things in your peripheral vision.
Right.
Have you experienced that? And have you done it as maybe a form of meditation and had any sort of epiphanies or realizations?
So the thing is, I've spent way too much time in front of mirrors back during my bodybuilding days.
We're
Yeah.
talking about, was it Narcissus? He
It was, yeah.
he starved to death, pining away at his own reflection.
Yeah, and this was like, I mean, here's the thing. When I was growing up, I read all these scary stories about like if you say Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror, something's gonna show up and kill you. Or if you stare too long in front of a candle, like keep just a candle on. There are all these creepypasta rule kind of stories. And there are so many of them that I was never really brave enough to mess around with that stuff. Because, even though I try to explain everything with logic, I believe in not stepping on certain toes, whether it's supernatural or something like that. I think there are things out of this world or in this world that we should not really mess with if we don't understand them. And with that being said, there have been times when I looked in the mirror for, again, way too long, not to observe my muscles in this case or whatever, but there have been cases where I would just look deeply and it's like staring specifically at the eyes. You can sort of see something there. And I cannot explain it in words any better way. Thank God I'm not a writer, right? I cannot explain it any better way, but sometimes when you look at those eyes, you sort of see maybe this inner child that's still there, that you think you've changed all these ways, but you still see that you're still the same sort of person as you were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago,
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it makes me think of, have you seen season 1 of True Detective?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. They actually produced it. They play 2 detectives that work for the state police in Louisiana. Okay. And one of the things that Matthew McConaughey's character does is he's got this tiny little, about the size of a big coin, mirror that he gets right up on and looks into. And I guess he just kind of, I don't even know if you were that close to it, what you would see really. Would it just be like your entire eye just kind of covers the area, or would it be like you see part of your eye and a lot of the wall? I don't even know. But yeah, that was his meditative process.
Right. And that's the thing. It depends on the perspective. Whether you're standing on the side of the mirror or in front of it or below it or whatever, the mirror can still see, can still reflect all of it. And I think specifically when it comes to the eye, like if you get it very close and when you look very deeply into it, there's something scary about that for every horror author. And that's why nowadays I don't really look too much in the mirror, because there's always the sense of, like, here's the thing. The first time I became fascinated with mirrors, this was about, I'd say 15 years ago or so, when I played a game called Silent Hill. And there was this section where you're walking down a corridor and there's this just sudden wall of mirror. And on the other side, you can see the same world, but it's distorted. There's like blood everywhere, rust, wheelchair and whatnot. And you never really can go there. But, you can see the main character saying something ominous down the line of, for some reason, the world on the other side is calling to me. And you never actually explore it. They just leave it like that. And I think that was very powerful because it was so vague, it was so unexplained, that it just kept us wondering what is on that other side and why haven't they shown us more?
Well, you kind of picked up the idea and ran with it.
Well, could have been better in my opinion. Honestly, could have. And now that I think about it, that's something I should have done. Like, instead of Chloe going into the mirror world, I think the scarier part would have been if the mirror world was invading her world. That was specifically just focusing on that. And the thing is, it's always scary. Like, if you go somewhere to a haunted house, whatever, it's scary, but you can leave. But what's much scarier than that is when something supernatural or otherwise is invited into your home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, kind of circling back to talking about Chloe's issue with cutting, she kind of has a bit of a relapse. She becomes drawn at one point in the story to revisit cutting herself. And the way she describes it, as we were talking about, is just like drinking. The act is very pleasurable, but then there's the hangover of the pain the next morning due to the fact that she literally injured herself. And I know we've talked about addictive behavior before. You mentioned previously that you started out with fitness. Didn't you say that you had kind of an addictive fixation on fitness?
Absolutely.
And you ended up injuring your back, so you had to dramatically reduce the intensity of your workouts.
That's
Then
right.
is that when you kind of moved on to writing?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what
Yeah.
happened. So I injured my back. Up until then, I was hyper fixated on fitness. And
Hmm.
after the injury, I was unable to work out as much as I used to. And there was like a whole collapse of my identity because up until then, I was like, okay, I'm Boris the bodybuilder. Sounds very comical, but whatever. And that was my identity, you know.
Hmm.
But afterward, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And this is how I got into writing after I injured my back. I really spent a long time searching for what I would want to do that would make me as happy as fitness. Thinking back now, fitness never really made me happy. I do enjoy doing it, but not to that point that I convinced myself that I did, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was kind of doing the same thing, man. That life, the fitness influencers, fitness models, they make it look easy, but it's because that's what they do for a living, If you got
Exactly.
a day job, meal prepping and working out is like, that's all you do basically is work and
Right.
engage in physical fitness. So good God.
It's terrible. It's terrible because we don't really know what happens behind, those scenes. Because so many fitness influencers, they're going to be posting how they're eating, clean stuff like just bland chicken and broccoli and rice. They're going to be dieting 365 days a year, but we don't really know what's going on there. The abuse of the drugs and the performance enhancing drugs and so on. There's just so many things that they don't tell us about. And it's one of those things that becomes very addictive because you're constantly striving to become like them. And even when you do, there is always somebody that's better and you want to become like them and you're just chasing this goal. It's like a carrot on a stick you can never really reach.
Yeah, I remember I read this book called Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, I believe, by Michael Matthews. And
Mhm.
he's so straight up about everything. He's no bullshit. And he's like, let me tell you something about people that compete at the professional level. They are all doing a minimum of $180,000 worth of pharmaceuticals a year.
Oof.
I
Okay.
was like, Jesus.
It was the same with that guy recently, Liver King. He's known as Liver King on Instagram, and he's ripped. And he was promoting he called them ancestral products, and was eating like raw meat, livers, and the bull testicles and so on. And he was promoting these products and this lifestyle, saying you can be like me if you follow this lifestyle. Until there was a leak that showed that he's using about $10,000 a month for steroids and growth
Mm,
hormones and whatever. And of course, this is
yeah.
like what so many people just in the fitness industry, and not just in the fitness industry, anywhere essentially, they don't tell you the truth, the ugly truth behind that, because this is very, very polished for the public eye.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's at least it seems there's a way that you can do some of those under the supervision of a doctor and not have any issues, but to the level that, you can't abuse them to the point where you just no longer have the ability to produce testosterone and
Right.
expect to be okay. Like, I mean, your kidneys, your liver, your estrogen levels go wacky because you've offset your testosterone levels so high,
Exactly.
like just, ugh.
Yeah, it's very addictive for them. It's very hard to stop. And I've seen so many people, they go like, you know what, I'm just going to do one cycle of test. It never ends on
Yeah.
one cycle of test. They just start taking, harder stuff,
Uh-huh.
more hardcore stuff, and they just can never stop.
Yeah, I can't imagine like with my addictive nature, I've never done steroids and I never will. Cause like when you're like in an off season, if you're competing, I can't imagine, being in the off season, not, you spend this time training where you're like a maniac, just all juiced up. And then all of a sudden,
Exactly.
okay, well, it's the off season. So you just don't do that anymore. What are you talking about?
Right. And this is like why so many people start to take so many cycles, because they see the strength they can accomplish. They see how strong they can become. And this is something they were never going to be able to achieve naturally. And it just becomes pointless for them to train natty. So they start to take all the steroids.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other things in your life that you pursue with an addictive aplomb?
Oh, pretty much anything I start. The thing is, when I injured my back, that probably should have been my lesson to curb my, I want to say, tenacity for certain things. But whenever I really like something, I start to pursue it almost zealously. That's what happens with my writing or whatever else. Right now, I'm learning Hungarian. I'm also doing the same thing with that, just relentless. And it's a problem because, although I enjoy being on the road, so to say, and just moving forward, like for me, the process of writing a book, it's very fun. But when I finish it, I don't stop to admire the book. It's done.
Oh, yeah, you keep going.
Exactly. I'm moving on
animal.
to the next one. And this is a problem. This is a very big problem because I never really stopped to reflect. And I'm trying to work on that. Like last year, I reached a very big financial milestone as an author. And this was a big thing for me. And I've also had just so many successful milestones last year, like translation rights and whatever. And I never really stopped to look. And then my girlfriend said, like, you got to learn to enjoy your success. And I was like, no, there's no enjoyment. I just keep going. Got to keep grinding. And it's a toxic mentality, especially if you're going to be influencing other people that way because they feel like they need to keep doing the same thing. And that's not the case. You got to follow your own pace, whatever you feel you're comfortable with,
Yeah, I mean, I understand the admonition to slow down and enjoy your success, but honestly, like from what I've read about really highly successful, highly innovative, creative people, they're kind of dicks. They're kind of like zoned in and fixated on what they're doing.
Exactly.
So it's like there's something to be said about kind of having this addictive aplomb with whatever it is that you're pursuing. So
right,
I don't know.
Again, it's a problem, because you got to be balanced in everything you do.
Yeah.
I understand that somebody has a drive to, accomplish something, that he has a dream, but it's very, very easy to stray from that, once you start to get into the whole mindset of just going to keep grinding, going to keep working, never going to stop. It's addictive and it's very easy to forget what the initial goal was over there. And it's important years from now when you start working on something that when you look back, that you can say that you've made a change, but a positive change, not just in your life, but other people's lives too.
Yeah. So it's one thing to have this obsessive drive to make it towards this goal, but it's a different thing when you get so obsessed with the intensity and the chaos of the work itself that you feel like you can't rest for a single minute. You just need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happens is your life just passes by you, you don't really see the important things. And I totally understand because, over here, people are like, they just keep working, hoping for one day to have enough money so they can stop working. You're never going to have enough money that you can say, okay, I'm happy now. I'm going to stop,
Yeah.
Because I know from my own case, the same thing happened. I said to myself, okay, I want to earn this much money in 1 month, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to start looking for some other venues and whatever. It never happened. It never happened, and it's just one of those things that, like I said, it's a trap. It's a rabbit hole that it's very hard to get out of.
Well, you always want more than your baseline, and once you achieve more, that becomes your baseline.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah. Well, the ending of the story is very unexpected, and I will not spoil it. So listeners at home, be sure to click the link in the description and check out this masterpiece. Although, from what I gather from Boris, he doesn't think so. So don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He wrote it, but he doesn't know what he's talking about.
A bit of an exaggeration, but all right.
But I wanted to know, when it comes to having issues like Chloe's, people very often escape to the world of imagination and the creation of art. Do you think that there is a level at which you can immerse yourself in that world that can be self-harm instead of self-care? And I'm not necessarily talking about what we just talked about, which is like this insane work ethic. Just, is there a point where absorbing yourself in the therapeutic nature of art can become sticking your head in the sand?
Oh, it can definitely be like that. It can definitely be like that. I can speak from experience that, I've been like that my entire life. I would rather immerse myself in, my own worlds, writing, drawing, whatever it is as a kid, it can create an illusion, because you're stuck in this world. You would rather not go back out to the real world, but you have to. And
Mm.
that's not just for writing, not just for art. That can be for pretty much anything. Anything that can give you a sort of an escape, it can provide that. And the problem is that, if you get too absorbed in it, you start to neglect your real life. And this is when
Mm-hmm.
things like responsibilities and, generally just your satisfaction with your life starts to dwindle, because you've created this perfect illusion of a world. And it doesn't even need to be a world. Sometimes it's a person. You create this perfect illusion of a person, idea of a person, and then when you actually, for example, meet that person or go back to the real world, you see that things are not really, or not at all, the way you had imagined them in your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's that expression? I don't know if it's so much as an expression, it's just a truism, is you don't want to meet your heroes. Like, I mean, it's one thing to get an autograph signed, but to like be able to talk to them for a few minutes, they're going to do or say something horrible that's just going to ruin your image of them.
Exactly. And this is why I'm so against idealizing people, because it's great to have somebody who's going to be an inspiration for you, but you should never really idealize someone because, like you said, they can disappoint you. They're human, like you and me, and they're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is next on the horizon? Because just like we spoke of, you don't stop. I mean, you must have like 4 novels ready to go.
So I was really busy last year writing so many novels, which I rapid released just recently. I focused on thrillers a lot. And one upcoming book I got is a book about an evil mother that moves in with her son and his wife, and she is making their lives miserable.
Mm.
That's going to be more of a psych thriller, which I'm not that excited about. Just another book. But the one that I am excited about is Astrophobia, which I'm co-writing with an author named David Virgutz, a fellow Texan of yours.
Okay.
And yeah, and what happens is, so we started writing that book like almost 2 years ago, and it was going on and off and on and off, and we finally finished it. It's almost done. It's almost ready to go out to the editor, and it's basically going to be a space horror book.
Space horror. All right.
Right.
Interesting. Well, the first time you were on the show, you revealed that your prolific output was the result of writing 5,000 words a day. Are you still maintaining that?
Yeah, yeah. I was going to increase it for some time, but that is just
Holy
not going to be
shit.
possible. It's it's like 5K words and I'm burnt out. Maybe if I'm feeling really inspired, 6K tops, but there's no way I can do more than that, because here's the thing. My productivity drops after, even just a few hours of writing. And as my style changes, as it's more descriptive, it's harder and harder to write so many words in short time. So it's like I spend more time staring at a blank piece of paper, thinking of what I'm going to write rather than actually writing. So many of the hours are spent, just contemplating how am I going to make this paragraph more descriptive, more convincing, and whatever, rather than like what it used to be like, just fast paced.
Okay. Well, are you a cinephile at all, or do you like, I can't remember the last time you were on, whether we discussed film or not.
Not lately, not lately. I do watch some movies from time to time, but it's like I've been so busy lately that I've only watched the most popular things that have popped up on my feed. But I really want to, because I get so much inspiration from other movies, but it's been years since I watched anything proper, so to say.
Okay. Well, I love all forms of horror, but I really like extreme horror, in particular French extremism, But there is one movie that if you look up, top 10 most disturbing movies ever made, if it's not number one, it's usually in the top 5. So I finally grew the cojones to actually watch it. And I'm talking about a Serbian film.
Oh, of course.
So I was curious to know, besides being a controversial film in general, it was particularly controversial in Serbia due to the director's intentions behind making it. So I was wondering if you'd seen it and what your thoughts are on it. And the writer-director, and I'm going to butcher his name, I'm going to make a valid college try attempt.
All right.
Sirjan Spasojevic.
That's good. That's pretty good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is he Serbian?
As far as I know, yeah. The last name definitely sounds Serbian. Anything with an itch at the end is Serbian. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
So to answer your question, so no, I have not seen the movie specifically because I know what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, a few years back, you could never say that you're from Serbia without somebody saying, "Oh, a Serbian movie, for a Serbian film, whatever it's called."
That's what I was afraid of. I was like, oh, so it's like one of those things that pisses people off.
Oh, I'm fine with that. Don't worry about that. But it was like for a while, whenever you say Serbia, people would know about Serbia because of that. Nowadays, now that the movie is not as prevalent so much, they mistake Serbia for Syria and Siberia, which is a better outcome from my understanding. But no, I've not watched the movie specifically because of that, because I'm not very much into extreme movies. I think the most extreme thing I've seen is The Human Centipede, and I don't even know if that classifies as something extreme. So, yeah.
I haven't seen that. I know what it's about, and I don't know. I guess I'm not so much on the gross factor as the extreme, like, violence.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So
I don't know what that says about me.
Well, it's so popular these days. You got extreme horror for books, and I follow a few groups on Facebook. There's all the rage about it right now. Just everybody's talking about it. It's the most disturbing stuff you can imagine, and they're recommending it. And I remember, like, before, maybe about 3 months ago or so, there was this one book they were recommending called Dead Inside. Okay. And I didn't know what the plot was about. I didn't even know about the extreme horror subgenre back then, And I was like, okay, so many people are talking about this. I'm going to read it. And this is the one book that I wish I could unread. If there's one thing I could just wipe my memory for, it would be that book.
So you're saying, let's see here, Dead Inside?
Dead Inside. I forgot the
author's
name.
Why does that
Chandler
sound familiar?
Morrison.
Chandler Morrison. Okay. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, how's the back doing, and what is your exercise regimen like these days?
Thank you for asking. It's actually a lot better. It's much, much better than it used to be. Some days it's as good as new. Like last year, for example, I went to Iceland, and I drove 3 to 4 hours a day, no pain at all. But then I realized a lot of the pain, it wasn't because, of my sitting position and the driving. It was because of that damned BMW I had,
Oh, damn those cars.
It was, oh God, it was such a terrible car, because not only was it uncomfortable, it wasn't an automatic, it was a manual, and, my leg was going numb constantly from pressing on the clutch. You got to squat so much so you can press the clutch and the gas and the brake properly, And then I drove this small car, this Kia in Iceland, and there was no pain at all. I was like, you know what? I realize now I just hate BMWs. So that was one revelation I've had. But, going back to the back problem, climbed the volcano there, no problem at all. So the regimen I've been following is I do McGill's exercises from Stuart McGill. He has a lot of good exercises. He has a book that he's published where he explains everything about what you can do to make your back better, how you can strengthen the muscles over there and so on. But it was also a combination of, just trial and error, because there have been so many times that I injured my back. And when it starts to become better, I start to kind of get it back into the mentality of, what, that old bodybuilding mentality. I'm going to squat more. I'm going to bench more. And this is a mistake. Because I start to, feel
you're going to have a relapse.
Exactly. And that's what happens. I have a relapse. And what happens is, I injure my back. I have a flare up. And I'm like, okay, gonna wait 2 weeks. I know exactly now what it is. I used to panic all the time. I was like, okay, this is not good. I injured my back. What if I really injured it badly this time?
Yeah.
Nowadays, if it happens, I'm like, oh, this again. Okay, I'm just gonna take a few days off. That's it.
Hmm.
So I still have some issues with the back from time to time if I, exaggerate with my workouts and whatever. But overall, it's doing okay. It's doing much better. So I highly recommend, checking out McGill.
Oh, I will definitely do that because I'm having the same back issues.
Ah,
But,
it's very funny because until the age of 29, you're fine. The
uh,
moment you turn 30, it's like you are never at 100% health. There's
I thought
always,
35 was decay management. It's
oh,
30?
for me, it was 30. For you, it was
Oh,
35.
shit. I don't know. I was drinking a lot back then, so
Okay.
I may not have noticed.
You don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, Boris, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely. So as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug, reiterate, or let your readers know about?
Nothing much. We already spoke about astrophobia and the other book about the evil mother. There's really nothing new going on with me except I'm still writing, I'm still publishing. So just check my page from time to time and you're going to see a new book popping up.
All right. Sounds great. Listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Boris, once again, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
And thank you to everyone that tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday when I will be joined by a writer of extreme horror whose violent and depraved work knows no bounds. And if you're a fan of creepypasta narrative horror fiction, check out the Mind of Midgard YouTube channel by clicking the link in the description. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.
Desert, big sky, head on your shoulder, telling me white lies.